Hello and welcome to this episode of TF. It is Thursday. That means it's the free one, but Milo's not here, so no one's doing the drive time radio voice. Maybe somewhere in Australia, at 4 in the morning.
Bolt upright in bed at 4 in the morning to go, it's the free one.
Yes, that's right. And it is Riley, it is Hussein, it is November, it is Nate making his appearance as is custom with the Mayan calendar. We were scheduled to be joined by Lloyd Evans, the Spectator's theater critic, but he's gotten held up near the train station. So instead, Séamus Malekafzali, our Iran correspondent, has joined us to talk a little bit about the goings-on between Israel and its neighbors. Séamus, how's it going?
It's going fine. It's been better, though.
Mm-hmm. Mm. Thank you for making it. I mean, I just don't know why Lloyd Evans... He said he was just coming from a talk at a university, and yet he's just been detained for hours.
I didn't actually read the article. I was fixing a thing outside in the studio, and then when I came in, I just heard everyone say, "Oh, that's so racist." And I was just like, "Yeah."
Yeah, I fully put both hands to my face and went, "That's so racist."
It's a Spectator article.
The Spectator! They broke a new ground.
In an unexpectedly horny way as well.
Again, all politics is sexual pathology. I mean, Matt Christman had been saying this.
Yeah, but you don't really see a lot of that. Well, I don't know whether you don't really see so much of that these days in terms of the type of racism that emerges out of horniness, but also makes you very horny as well.
Yeah, it used to be the preserve of Andrew Lilico talking about how women in niqab made him horny.
Yeah. It's a very specific and special kind of person. And they are becoming rarer in British public life, which is not to say that they don't exist, but
nobody wants to work anymore. All of the professions.
A lot of the sort of new racist or the new pundits that are sort of making their names out of racism on GB News. They're very flat. They kind of all say the same thing. They all read the same type of stuff online. And my thinking is look, I don't think that you're ever going to extinguish racism out of British public life. I feel like it kind of depends on it. So if you're going to be racist, at least kind of make it somewhat entertaining. And this actually delivers it very well.
Reading series up front.
When Veit Harlan was on trial for his Nazi crimes, one of the defenses that he brought forward was that Yud Seuss, he brought forward all of the letters that his lead actor had received from German admirers, that it couldn't possibly have been anti-Semitic, because all of these women had the hots for his anti-Semitic character.
Yes, Seuss, or the Jew Seuss, who is a horrible piece of shit doing horribly Jewish things to everyone. But it's not an anti-Semitic movie because people are like, thank you for showing the truth.
Imagine writing fan mail for that movie. Or the Nazi propaganda wasn't enough. You're already doing all the Nazi stuff, but also you want to big them up a bit. You want them to feel good about themselves, Leave your Führer a tip so he has some walking around money.
If you're scratching your head at what we've been talking about, I wanted to open by talking about the Dubai rainstorms and how our plans to locate to the upper 10 floors of the Barrage have been scuppered because we were not able to hire a boat from the airport because all the crypto guys got them. However, when you see an article like this where someone in the Spectator writes, "I went to go see a lecture at Cambridge given by a person who I'm going to name, and then
sexually harass in print, and then I'm going to talk about how I got so horny about it I had to get my shit honked off professional style by a sex worker." Yeah. That doesn't just go into the reading series, that promotes the reading series to the first item of business.
It says on the sex worker he sees, he says, "She looked Chinese rather than Irish." She was claiming to have an Irish name.
The two ethnicities.
Theater critic goes into train station massage parlor and shocks masseuse with perfect Gaelic poem.
Going to the girls' house, being going to the island, being yeah, it's fine. I just didn't expect it to be Chinese.
I don't know. I feel like this is a Mr. Beast challenge. You have to jack off to AI generated erotic fiction.
So she looked Chinese rather than Irish, but you never know these days, so I asked her which part of Ireland she came from.
You do never know these days. That's so true.
You never know these days.
What does he... does he think that Die Another Day was a documentary? What the fuck?
to be fair, these days it is generally considered offensive to just ask someone outright out of nowhere, are you Irish or Chinese?
People are afraid to ask the question, what if an Irish man was Chinese?
It's true.
These guys is pointing that out.
Anyway, it is a strange thing to see. It's a strange thing to see in print.
It feels like it should maybe be like a criminal thing to have in print. Not for the sex work so much as the like naming an academic whose talk you saw and talking about how like you thought she was so beautiful that you were going to like write about a hand job you got in consequence of this. Like that feels like
everything, like nobody cares anymore. Gen Z did this in some way, I'm guessing.
This is what this academic would look like if they were Irish or Chinese.
Lloyd Evans, you are you get the Weirdo of the Week award, which we've not given out in a while.
That's not a good enough award. You get the Go to Prison award.
I don't want to blow up the spot on the various archive paywall defeat sites, but I feel like we should maybe find a way to embed a link so people can read this, because it really is genuinely insane. But it's not the reading series. It's just out there in the ether.
You wouldn't want me to read this into the record. Like, some of the stuff in here, I don't know that I could read for the straight
First
face.
podcast referred to prevent.
Oh, you think we haven't been prepared to prevent already?
You know how easy it is to buy a Tory MP, right? It's so easy.
Well, you think we could hire one to like read, like William Ragg is going to read this for us?
Yes,
like in Parliament, so it can't be defamatory.
Yeah, we're gonna hire some an MP. We're gonna be like, hey, we're a lobbying group for the Spectator,
Saudi Aramco.
we're a lobbying group. We're going to lobby the all-party group for like Ireland, China, bilateral relations. And in order to do that, you have to read this into the record.
You have to read one of the strangest articles the Spectator has published in recent years, which is saying something by quite a bit. You have to read that. Well, I mean, I think we just need to. Tory MP, like, I don't. You know me, right? I hate the whole like, oh, the Tory MPs are behaving badly again, unless it's funny, right? Unless it's like Scott Benton being like, I am not a gambling lobbyist and then getting a recording playing to him saying, I am a gambling lobbyist. That's funny. I'll tell you what else is funny. Is the Mark Menzies, what has emerged about Mark Menzies, our other news item, which I'm segueing into now, who was a Tory MP for filed. It's in Lancashire, and he now has lost the whip of the party for saying he called his former campaign manager, like an octogenarian lady, at 3:15 in the morning to ask for £5,000 in cash because he was locked in a flat with, quote, some bad people and it's a matter of life and death.
I love conservative associations are such a funny thing, right? Because as you say, it's like a bunch of old ladies in blue rinses who are handcuffed to a guy out of a James Ellroy novel, right? And he's just getting kidnapped, right? Getting like express kidnapped and having to call your like constituency association to be like, we need to like liquidate some funds.
How fucking embarrassing is it that like you get kidnapped? Presumably that's what happened. You get kidnapped. You're in a flat with some bad people as an MP, and the most they think they can squeeze out of you is £5,000.
It's all. This is a low budget country in so many ways. Like all the corruption it's so cheap.
Yeah.
You can buy an MP for so little. You can apparently ransom an MP for so little.
Well, look, we've been in an era of wage stagnation and for a very, very long time. So we don't actually know what a good wage is. We don't know what
they didn't have Toblerone before the repeal of the Corn Laws, and if they did, then maybe you could have bought an MP for a Toblerone.
This is the tip to like MP kidnappers. Know your worth, like think about your own like self-worth and your own value before you start making demands,
I feel like Chris Morris should not be done making movies about Britain. I think the story of a kidnapped MP finding out how much he's really worth is just perfect.
Just back-to-back news items about people having interesting experiences with sex workers, allegedly. Can I say that?
Yeah, I think it's more than alleged.
It's been alleged.
I mean, if he writes about it himself, I feel like, yeah.
Yeah.
The first guy did. This MP though, the allegation is that the way in which he got kidnapped was that he had too interesting of a time with a sex worker.
Yeah.
And that led to him being kidnapped. So
but this is like not the first. He's been doing this for years. Like he's resigned from the front bench.
Getting kidnapped. It's like Parliament's #1 getting kidnapped enthusiast.
He loves getting extorted. Like he's so good at getting extorted.
But also, like, I'm just saying, as someone who was just old enough to be watching the news as a kid when this like John Major sleaze scandals were happening, and they were making news in America at the time. Like, how weird with it do you have to get as a Tory MP for it to be like so above and beyond that you end up being blackmailable, extortable, kidnappable? Like, it's just bizarre to think, like, what is he getting up to?
You realize that, like, the Dougie Smith sex party Tories are, like, the most socially well-adjusted of them, probably.
Yeah, I mean, I guess in a way it feels like the sex party phenomenon is such a universal British thing that, like, I don't even really know how to gauge it very well. Because it's like, I guess in a way that Americans think, sex party social circle, and they just think of the guy painted all gold in JFK. Like, they don't think of just like, no, your constituency MP, half of your council, the guy who runs the corner shop, the guy who owns the fucking, what is it, the Quick Fit franchise.
The guy who owns the non-league football team. The manager of the non-league football team.
The guy who runs the one remaining Wimpy Burger in your local area. Like, it's just, everyone's in on it.
So, another couple of things before we get on to sort of more of our main stuff, that just looking back at some of what has happened to him recently is like Scott Benton tier fun, because in 2014 he had his first experience of being extorted by a sex worker and then stepped down from this front bench position and
to spend more time getting extorted
exactly.
by sex work.
But that was like, then in 2017 he was accused by police of getting a friend's dog drunk.
What? How does that work?
Well, he says they were having a fight and he got his friend's dog drunk.
Just in order to win the fight against the dog.
He was trying to kill the dog, but he was feeding the dog amaretto chocolates and the dog didn't die. It just got hammered.
Yeah, it's it says he's accused of locking himself in his friend's house, drunkenly getting the dog drunk, and then trying to start a fight with him when his friend confronted him about it.
This dude sounds like fun. He sounds like he knows how to party, and I think we're hating on him because we're jealous, is the thing.
Yeah, we're hating on him because we live in a society where you're not allowed to be a legend anymore.
yeah, genuinely. This is like one of the very small number of legend MPs.
Like, I think if we had like a more liberal culture around drugs in this country, we could have a story of an MP getting into a fist fight because he like blew weed smoke into his neighbor's XL bully's face. Like, no, he's cool. He's a chill dog.
See, I was thinking about this, completely unrelated. I know we have to move on, but Hussein's story about the neighbors getting searched for drugs at the house, and one of his friends was like filming the guy on his phone and doing Facebook Live, like, fuck the pigs, fuck the cops, this is fucking illegal search and shit. And then like 30 minutes later, America brain for me, I would think like, okay, the cops are gonna come beat this guy's ass. 30 minutes later, Hussein, you said you looked out the window and like they'd made peace, and like the guy who had been filming was like sharing his vape with the cops to try out different flavors.
And they were like taking selfie, or like they were on like the police were on the Facebook Live, and it was all just like very chill.
I think a lot about the Edinburgh gangster who was like, I am at this location if you want to come and assassinate me, which you won't because you're too scared. And then surprisingly, someone assassinates at the location.
Yeah. So
like half an hour later, like someone clearly saw the video that he posted or the live stream that he did that was like, you are too much of a pussy to come and shoot me. And then at that moment was like lacing them up to like come and shoot him.
Like, everybody wants to be fucking Yahya Sinwar, but they're not willing to like go the extra mile.
Yeah, I'm doing that exact same live stream, but from a tunnel beneath the pub in Leith.
They all want to be Nasrallah, where you're doing the exact same live stream, but like with the Star Wars Imperial March playing behind you. It says, he actually says then about the dog drinking. I cooperated with the police investigation, and officers were handed more than enough evidence to completely clear me of any wrongdoing whatsoever. The evidence in question was pictures of his former friend also getting the dog drunk.
Twist!
They work together!
Who among us? Whoever is not guilty casts the first stone. That's like a law.
Whoever has no sin Let him pour the first Cosmopolitan in the dog bowl.
You know those police recruitment ads that are like, oh, it's a different job every day. You never know what you'll see next. That might legitimately be true because of this. Like,
no one has
the
thought
kind of
to
like,
do this and like take it to that full execution before.
Yeah. Like detectives having to like look up what crime it is to get a dog drunk.
Ain't no law that says a dog can't be drunk.
No, there's like a law.
Animal cruelty.
No, there's a law from the Regency period that was designed to try to like catch Prince George out on something to strike him off the list.
Imagine, I mean, all I can say is that, like, typically if there's a problem and someone wants to call the police, they'd better hope that problem is serious enough to make the cops think there might be repercussions if they don't do it, because the cops are just going to be on their phones Googling Met Police jobs Dubai salary. And like, so what was it about the circumstances where someone's like, this guy's getting a dog drunk, and the cops in whatever fucking region he was
field
in,
it's kind of like the Angela Rayner thing, you know, like the actual dog drunkenness is a pretty minor crime, but it's like clearly there's a kind of like there's some strings being pulled here, you know.
I'd like to apply the rubric of like the great noticing of things, right? Which is just, we've seen time and again that the British press is able to just decide who gets a like -50 approval rating by just noticing all of the things they would have done. I'd love to include like dog drunkenness in the great noticing of things.
Performing a like field sobriety test on a dog.
But it's the thing is, if you want to be I think the only place where the police would be in that position, November, right, is if you are in what is essentially a Tory rotten borough that's been like voting blue for like 100 years.
Yeah.
At that point, if it's somewhere that has never returned a non-Tory MP and you become a police officer there, most of your job is going to be like things to do with shit that MP is doing.
Yeah, for sure.
You're basically a kind of babysitter at that point.
Genuinely, yeah. I think about this too because like we had our first trans MP, and she was our first trans MP because she was outed because of exactly this. Because she was a Tory MP in like the middle of nowhere and like got drunk and crashed her car in some kind of like bizarre situation, and the cops like had to like pull her out of this and were like, wait a second, why is our local MP wearing women's clothing? So like really weird, dark shit out in the countryside in these safe seats, you know?
Chris Morris, please make genuinely. A movie about this. So not even about this, just take this concept of a Tory MP in a safe seat.
Because you can do anything, you know?
Last thing.
And they do.
Last thing. This is a little more Menzies, and then we want to move on to like what we're actually here to talk about. Which is that it was claimed by the Times that he arrived drunk out of his mind at the last night of the proms, and then walked into the VIP section when he told he didn't have a seat there, started poking people. He's a child. Like, what? We have child legislators. Because like
this is the thing, right? This is why we're the second most powerful country in the world, right? It's because we continue to generate people like this. Like America's the most powerful country in the world because it continues to generate people who ask questions like, do you want Columbia University to be cursed by God of the Bible, right? And we're the second because we create this guy.
Yeah. We create someone whose personality is that they should have been a syphilitic Regency courtier, but in a time of phones and cars, basically. And I see it as a kind of person out of time. But I'll carry on. I want to talk about our core subject today. The thing that we brought you to talk on, Séamus. They're making Warhammer into Wokehammer. It's Wokehammer. They've made it Wokehammer 40 gender.
All I will say is that Trashfuture can never do to me what Well, There's a Problem did to me, in which they waited 2 hours to talk about Neom after they talked about Neom.
I'm so sorry for the way that we are.
It is very funny to see the same group of losers try to drum up a Gamergate over the fact that a company that is, again, like, just marketing itself differently is somehow betraying them.
Yeah, this like British company of like 5 chancers who worked out they could sell plastic figurines to like autistic kids is like, it's been lost to woke now. is the thing.
Well, this is from a Daily Mail article about it, which is video game executive Mark Kern accused Games Workshop of gender-flipping characters for woke points.
I want to know what the Venn diagram overlap between like Warhammer enthusiasts and Daily Mail readers is, because it can't be big.
Oh,
right?
Yeah. I mean, I'm excited for people to start like trying to learn enough about it to be mad, which is a very popular thing. But this guy says, Mark Kern says, you're gender-flipping characters to score woke points. Now, I didn't know that they've included woke points in the army balancing mechanisms. I thought it was...
Yeah, they've introduced like 2 new dice, which is making the game like more complicated and also more gay.
So use Indian numerals like they do in the Middle East, because good old-fashioned Arabic numerals, the unwoke numerals, weren't non-binary enough.
Yeah, I've also heard that like your starting position whenever you have to get like all the characters have to, or all the figurines have to face Mecca.
Yeah.
I mean,
and there's like a special compass for that.
They made the Space Marines Irish and Chinese.
He says, the issue with Warhammer and the Custodes, the army that they're changing, is a lie. They could have changed it all they wanted, but they decided to lie and pretend it was that way all along. You were mad about your toys. Adult men are getting mad about their toys again, and it's really funny.
Likely adult men activity. One of their favorite things to do.
The reason I sort of bring this up, though, and the funniest thing is, there is this emerging consensus among like just people who spend their time drinking like the right-wing internet soup, right? The anti-vax conspiracy WEF shit, right? That anything BlackRock or Vanguard touches becomes woke. Anything that BlackRock or Vanguard invests in.
the woke VCs made Warhammer woke.
Yeah. The companies that through owning the index funds invest in everything.
I really don't think that that's true. But I mean, it's cool if they are, you know, but shout out to woke VCs.
Like, all I'll say is, if Larry Fink started BlackRock, built the world's largest risk management engine, and then basically created the asset class of exchange-traded funds in order to become a kind of 8 to 10% holder of every publicly traded company in the entire world, so he could make there be female Warhammer Space Marines, that is an admirable commitment to fandom.
It's called the long game.
I actually want to talk a little bit about our core subject, why, Séamus, we had you on today, which is, I have to question for you, is Alon Levy going to get a different job?
No. No. See, Elon Levy, or is it Alon or Elon? He's a very interesting subject because he clearly has formed this identity around himself as like a personal figure, independent of whatever job he has. But he himself, his heart, he has always wanted to be a spokesperson for the Israeli government.
Yeah. He's a podium guy, you know? He's in it for the podium.
Who doesn't love podiums? We saw the Yemeni Armed Forces spokesman guy. His podium keeps getting bigger. That's great. But this man, once he loses that compass, he's adrift. He theoretically could forge a different path for himself. Maybe he could go back to writing musicals again, like he used to. But he doesn't want to. He needs to be the voice for Israel. And when Israel doesn't want him, then he's just going to say, fuck you.
Once you've found the lure of the podium, you know, you can never go back. The true podium is in the heart, you know?
Exactly. That's why I can never do it.
I mean, Sarah Huckabee Sanders might literally be facing charges because of the lure of the podium, the custom podium, the artisanal podium. So you know what? Like, it's a phenomenon.
It's the golden calf.
Well, also, he got fired. He lost his real podium for beefing with David Cameron on Twitter, which is one of the funniest people to lose in the Mind Dojo to do the old Assadist who must go meme, but it's David Cameron.
Yeah, the guy as you say, November, to lose your position as the official atrocity denier in Britain for Israel to the guy who was Svengali'd by Lex Greensill is quite the achievement.
I have some Hussein lore here in terms of my very brief crossover with Alon Levy, which is that he I read
that comic book.
Yeah. So we sort of joined forces. He used to be a university debater. Now I also for a very brief time was a university debater, and we were sort of in the same circuit for the last year. I think it was 2013, and his face seemed very familiar, but he seemed like a lot nerdier and lankier back then. I never like competed with him at all, but what all this has sort of reaffirmed to me is that there's a certain type of university debater archetype that they can never sort of really escape or evolve from themselves. And he strikes me as that type who sort of like did university debating and it became his entire personality, and now he's sort of stuck with it. He's not really sure what to do other than to sort of do university debating, which is sort of why he is in the position of really begging people to let him come on their podcast.
You know what needs to happen? I'm pitching like art today. I'm pitching art forms today. Chris Morris knows what movie he needs to make. Hideo Kojima, Death Stranding 2, but it's about debate rather than like portering packages. And Alon Levy is our model for what the mules will be in Death Stranding 2.
They're calling it the first completely unplayable game.
All right. So, Séamus, I want to ask you, right? We talked about like the Iranian barrage of drones and missiles that were largely, not entirely, intercepted by Israeli air defenses on the last free episode. We sort of just went through it as a bit of an introduction, but I think we could use just a little bit of table setting to talk about answering what I think is the core question of this segment, which is between the World War III is now imminent position and the nothing ever happens position, where are we and how do we get here?
I mean, those are very wide positions. I think on the night that it happened, I think we were closer to World War III than I think a lot of people might want to admit to themselves, because the Israelis, it was found out recently that they did want to strike back Iran on that very night. They wanted to make the decision, but they were pushed off of it by outside actors. Now it seems like Biden has given them the go-ahead to move into Rafah and Gaza in exchange for them not pursuing full-blown regional war against Iran with a targeted strike offensively against Iran. Now, that staves off, of course, a gigantic multi-front war, but that's still engaging in this massive catastrophe of human suffering that is only going to increase and increase. If your concern is purely about, war coming to your shores, I think it's probably been staved off, at least for the moment. But the idea that this is just going to be able to simmer in the background forever, I also don't think is the case.
Basically, I think where we are now is everything changed on October 7th. And I think you can safely say everything changed again when there was sort of a demonstrated increased willingness of Iran and Israel to strike at each other and come close to striking at one another, basically, in terms of like power balancing in the region. But also that Israel appears to have, like, at least diplomatically, been able to turn this situation to its advantage by saying we will start a war with Iran and then essentially get U.S. backing to carry on engaging in like an active genocide in southern Gaza.
Yeah, I mean that's essentially true. I would say that less things, in retrospect, I think a few less things changed on the day that the missile strikes occurred against Israel, just because, October 7th, the ramifications of it have been so severe, and no one died during these missile strikes. But yeah, no, Israel has been trying to, in the aftermath of this, because of how Iran has played this, in which telegraphed everything so much, so well with other countries, made it pretty clear, at least in an unspoken way, that the intention was for most of these missiles to be intercepted. That Israel really doesn't have the angling that it wanted to out of this. I think their intention, if I can only speculate, was that they wanted, and I'll be frank, they wanted Jewish people inside Israel to die. They wanted casualty counts that they could point to. They wanted human stories of atrocities they could point to. And Iran denied that to them. And so now they still want that war, obviously, but they don't have a strong foundation for it. All they have suffered is a hit against their pride, an embarrassment, a humiliation. And that is a very difficult selling point to Biden, to its American backers, even if they are backing them to the hilt in all these different ways. That doesn't mean they won't stop threatening their backers with essentially like blackmail. This trade that's being talked about with Rafah, that's a form of like, we're going to kill thousands upon thousands of people one way or another. You have to decide which one you're going to choose. And also telling them that, there's recent messaging where like they're talking about London is going to be the next strike point for the IRGC's ballistic missiles somehow.
Okay, sure, fine. The IRGC has like blown up the worst bar you've ever seen.
Yeah. Central London can't get much worse, you know?
Yeah, we have lost up to 7 American candy stores to a washing machine tipped missile.
The drug money laundering industry might never recover.
Yeah. Oh my God, they've dropped. They have the world's longest range Shahed drone has ruined an Aberdeen Angus steakhouse.
I would say, I think that looking at this stuff recently, it feels like there was perhaps more. There was pressure on Israel. There was condemnation where there hadn't been previously since October 7th, I think, because of the World Central Kitchen convoy being bombed, deliberately targeted multiple times, numerous aid workers being killed completely deliberately. And then obviously the Israelis bombing the Iranian consulate it was a consulate, I believe, in Syria, and killing diplomatic workers and I think a senior IRC official.
Multiple IRGC officials, yeah.
Wow, yeah. And so it's like, so effectively there are these massive outcries about sort of like what, this is completely indefensible. And I agree with your point that Iran couldn't not respond, but what it seemed the Israeli government, the Israeli cabinet was hoping for was something that would then, because, obviously the instant there are any civilian casualties, particularly, like civilian casualties that are going to be humanized, in Western media, they could then be like, look at this barbarity, look at this horror, look at this blah, blah, blah. It's like, how, et cetera, et cetera. But they had the memes ready to go, but nothing happened because, as we talked about previously, like it seems as though this was announced, telegraphed, not coordinated, but like the fact that all of these aircraft scrambled to intercept these, the fact that all this stuff happened in a way that basically created a lot of visuals of missiles, ballistic missiles and drones over Israeli cities, over Green Line Israel cities, but then there wasn't the sort of like, look at this, look at what these beasts have done, etc. I'm of course mortified hearing about that. The response has been like, okay, in exchange for you not, escalating the war with Iran, we'll let you sacrifice more Palestinians, because in Biden's viewpoint, it feels like there is no such thing as an intolerable number of civilian casualties in that conflict, because he just doesn't see them, any of them, as civilians. I feel like, that's pretty obvious, but it's interesting to me because it does feel like this sounds crass, and I'm not trying to do this deliberately, but just sort of feels like the influence campaign about like, look at this hideous atrocity was all ready to go, and it's like, oh, whoops.
Well, that's why like there was another video that the sort of official Israeli Twitter account posted about Paris and how like scary Shia like flagellation rituals are coming to Paris. And again, like, it's clearly much of it is AI generated.
Honestly, if you're going to do that, just do what the Saudis did. We're like, we're going to do 9/11 on the CN Tower. Fucking Canadians, leave us alone or we're going to do it. Like, just be deliberate. Say what you mean.
So what we have, right, is, I think as you say, angling for further escalation that might not come, but what has come is also Hezbollah striking against Israel as well, right?
There was a targeted strike on, what the Israelis at least said was a community center, but was, of course, filled with IDF soldiers inside a town in northern Israel.
Again, it's, what do you accuse your enemies of? That is what you are doing.
Yeah, it's, and again, it's like, just as a side note, like, the IDF's, like, main headquarters is within, like, a very populated area of Tel Aviv. Like, it's a government of a certain territory. Obviously, their troops are going to be in a lot of different places and populated areas, but it's like, oh, I guess they got to get away from this extremely densely populated like territory with tons of cities. I don't know. It's strange. Anyway, yeah, they struck a northern town in Israel with this missile, and unlike Hamas, which is primarily working with unguided rockets, which don't have any sort of aiming capabilities at all, Hezbollah has thousands upon thousands upon thousands of targeted munitions, things that they can like aim with like specifically. And so with the strikes that came in during the initial Iranian retaliation, with all the strikes that have been happening against Israeli radar stations for the past few months, the implication is that the war that I think is to come in Lebanon is going to be much, much, much harder for the Israelis to fight. And they're being primed for war within Israel because I think people assume that Gaza was a relative cakewalk in the sense that only hundreds of Israeli soldiers died, but it was spread out over a long period of time, and people came back invigorated. They were posting on TikTok about how much fun they were having, shooting people's houses, blowing up hospitals, and so on and so forth. The war with Lebanon that they're promoting, I mean, it's going to be... Hezbollah keeps trying to, inform them in various ways that this is not going to go well for them.
Being the adults in the room,
Somehow.
Maybe too much so, the sort of long Star Wars CGI trailer for a Nasrallah speech, which is
some of the other ones where it's like, yeah, we've got recoilless rifles and anti-tank guided missiles knocking out military buildings and radar stations, and it's all edited in such a way that it hits all of the beats in Black Sabbath's Iron Man, but we're also legitimately the adults in the room as opposed to whatever the fuck you guys are doing.
Yeah, Hezbollah being the sort of sole 19-year-old in a sort of world of 14-year-olds.
No, but it's like, okay, you have a situation in which Hezbollah is the only pretty much a conventional army at this point. It's the only army probably other than the Iranian one that could bring the Israeli army to a stalemate of any sort. And Israel is still sleepwalking into this confrontation that it refused to de-escalate from in any meaningful way.
So here's the other question for me, right? Does Israel think that it is 1967 or 1982 when it's just sort of preparing
that's
for
what
its
I was
war?
going to say, is that everything is 1967, everything is 1982. 1973 definitely didn't happen. 2006 most certainly did not happen. And I feel as though, Séamus, I'm interested in your perspective on this, but it's the conditions have shifted. And also, it's not like Hezbollah has been we're not actively having, we're not on a war with an active front against Israel. So everyone's just going to go do, I don't know, harassing people at checkpoint duties. They've been involved in regional things, I believe, particularly in Syria, but also they are a military organization, and they, for better or worse, they understand the capabilities of who they are going to be fighting. Pretty likely they know who they're going to be fighting if they're going to be fighting anyone anytime soon. And it's they're not, it's not badass TikToks. They have been preparing specifically to both in terms of material and also terrain, how they would engage. To me, when I see this, it's the mashups of the music versus the videos are always funny, but you can tell that there's a lot of you don't go out and have these successful things happening in daylight without the preparation to avoid getting hit by a drone, for example, without getting hit by counter battery stuff. There's preparation involved.
It's the same complacency that led them to October 7th. Again, they had the one wake-up call and responded by committing a genocide, and then we're okay, cool. We can derive no further lessons from this. There is no other border we need to be worried about. All the guys up there can they evacuated a few villages, and then everyone else is staying there playing psytrance across the border from guys who have been watching them for years, who know them all by name, and who are apparently now getting the orders to go and shoot the satellite dishes off their roofs so they can edit it into an epic video.
No, I mean, the issue is that fundamentally, and you see this thread through everything, it's that Israel thinks that every single enemy they have to fight is like ISIS. They're like ISIS in the sense that
Hezbollah actually did fight ISIS.
Yes. No, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. They're bringing ISIS into the country, so therefore they're allies with ISIS. And also the Houthis are literally ISIS, and of course Hamas is working with ISIS to create chemical weapons. But the whole thing is that, okay, ISIS is this. I mean, fundamentally, there's an ideology, and you can debate the Salafism and the whatever. But fundamentally,
it was very funny that 5 guys in Gaza who were Hamas is woke, we're gonna do ISIS Gaza, and then immediately got killed.
If I'm not mistaken, weren't there Hamas people who were abducted and killed in the Sinai by ISIS?
There was a video. There was a video where someone who smuggled weapons to Hamas was executed on camera, and they're not friends with each other, but it doesn't matter. It's about okay, this ideology, which is fundamentally destructive, wants to literally conquer the world. That's what they explicitly say they want to do. They want to do the Holocaust, but worse. They want to do the Native American genocide, but worse. They love killing, slaughtering, raping, maiming openly, unabashedly. These people are pure evil. Therefore, all of our enemies, because they hate freedom, because they hate everything that we love, they must be like this. Not only like rhetorically, but they have to be literally like this. And therefore, once you believe that, you become immune to any sort of strategic thinking. Your enemies have to be stupid like ISIS was. They have to fundamentally have the same strategy that ISIS does, which was to literally fight the entire world because you think that the God himself is backing you. Like that leads Israel into complacency and confrontation again and again and again and again, and they learn only small parts from it, not anything that would prevent on October 7th, like Nova was saying, from happening again. And Hezbollah is like, I'm not saying this from like a propagandist point of view, like this is 100,000 strong force with a gigantic missile supply. They can be resupplied from outside. Like, this is not a situation in which this is like Egypt 1967, like you were saying, where, of course, they want to fight Israel, but they're not trained fundamentally to fight Israel. They're an army of conscripts. If you are in Hezbollah, you are training to fight Israel. That is your raison d'etre. That is all, pretty much all you are wanting to do.
Yeah, there's a guy making you do infinity sit-ups on the basis of like, you can make them stop playing Psytrance one day.
You are engaged in a fight that you believe is for civilization, that you believe is for humanity, not for like some like world conquest, which is its own thing. Like, that is the way that this fight has been sold to the Arab population, fundamentally. So you can't fight that easily.
I'd like to go on as well, right, to other questions about people's goals, because if you read American or British sort of commentary, because I think this observation holds true for most things, which is that the further you are from actual power and influence, the more keen you are for escalation.
Yeah, if you're the type of guy who like buys your own podium, for instance,
you can see columnists baying for it. The rhetoric you get about Iran is that anything less than basically a boots on the ground invasion, or at least a sort of significant barrage with standoff weapons, is going to be akin to appeasing Hitler in Czechoslovakia.
It's all Munich,
correct? Yes.
Over again. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I look at this too sometimes, but it's like, okay, because I wasn't on the episode recently where you mentioned this, but just when people were calling for Israel or Israel partnered with Britain to invade Iran, it's like, okay.
From where?
From where? How? Like, a country 4 times the size of Iraq, far more stable, far wealthier, with a much better trade, much better integrated civil and military structure. And it's like, Iraq went really well. It's a huge success we're always pointing to.
We're going to do it from Herat.
And we also had it was a relative to the size of people involved. It was a very small force, but like it was still like 140,000 troops in the initial invasion. It's like, okay, well, you need 4 times that. Where are you getting them from? Britain?
Exactly.
Army's gone woke. Sorry, can't do it. Israel, well, they got a problem. They put their border wall on the Microsoft Azure cloud, and integration didn't go very well. Like,
so I think my question, right, is that talking about Iran in those terms assumes that it is it has infinite ambitions and has to be stopped before it, like, I don't know, takes like driving slowly in a white Audi to like other countries, to having really sculpted eyebrows to other countries.
Yeah,
right?
And you look at like internal dissent in Iran and stuff, and it's like the Iranian government doesn't survive that stuff for as long as it has by being impatient or by being particularly rash about this. Yeah. Nor any of the foreign policy stuff.
It has to calibrate its responses.
So what does Iran want? Like, why were those guys in the consulate in Syria? What is Iran actually aiming to do? And again, how are Israel and its Western allies willfully misunderstanding them?
I mean, obviously, like, Iran wants, regional influence. Like we don't have to mince words about this. It wants regional influence. It wants to create a bulwark against American influence in the region. It wants to, it does want to dismantle Israel. But, fundamentally, again, it goes back to the whole thing about ISIS or comparing Iran to, the Nazis or whatever. It fundamentally, it's projection of all of the imperialisms of Western countries, its projection of Israel's own conquering objectives. Iran seeks a different kind of power in that way, whereas Israel deliberately wants land. It wants land for Jewish settlers to settle on.
It's not an exaggeration in the sense that I don't know if a lot of people outside, people who don't follow this stuff, are aware. And there's more reporting on it now than there was prior to October 7th. But there is a kind of apocalyptic strain of revanchist Zionism that has political power, or certainly political currency in the Israeli state, that believes that the true Israel goes from the entirety, basically from Cairo to the Tigris River. And
yeah, you occasionally see some like strange post that's like, hey, why is this woman in Israel hanging out with all these like red cows?
Yeah, you see this enormous map and you're like, damn, the Egyptian and Syrian merger in the Cold War really expanded. It's like, oh wait, shit, they're saying that's technically the true homeland, thereby like biblical Jewish homeland, and as such, like this is one of those things where this is not everyone, but there's enough people, and Netanyahu's path to staying in power and out of jail has involved at best appeasing these people. And so like there is a desire on the part of anything that kind of pushes that conflict in, because the assumption is that it'll only go one way.
You know, they found an ancient Psytrance track in Baghdad.
There are some secret infected mushroom albums being hidden in a secret Tower of Babel, and the only way you can find it is to restore the entirety of biblical Israel, which I think is a bit of it's not. I think this is not even an anachronism. This is what's the right word?
It's just fantasy.
It's fantasy. Yeah.
And it's so funny that particularly with Netanyahu, right? That his path to staying in power and out of jail runs through these guys, not because he has any particular regard for anyone other than himself, right? It's just that he is so unlikable that he's alienated every other political constituency in Israel he's ever worked with. And so he's left in this like war cabinet of guys who despise him, whether it's because it's like split down the middle between guys like Yoav Gallant and like Gadi Eisenkot, who like hate him because they correctly recognize that he's stupid and corrupt, or guys like Ben Gvir who hate him because they think he's woke, right? And he's just trapped in the middle of this.
Also, there are Kahanists that also think that Ben Gvir is woke now. Be clear. I'm not even joking. This is like
he's gone woke.
Yeah,
he's gone
there
woke.
There are people that left Otzma Yehudit, the Jewish Power Party, because they thought that he had compromised too much. Like, this is the fucking state of Israeli politics right now. These people can't be fucking reasoned with. Let's be real here.
This is like I keep trying to think, the best political analog for the most powerful strain in like Israeli electoral politics appears to me, not like people are like, oh, it's like Trump, whatever. No, it's Vladimir Zhirinovsky. That's who your analog is. The Russian liberal Democrat who was like, Putin is woke. We have to nuke Europe immediately.
I mean, if you want the easiest comparison, right? Politics that's entirely controlled by like a shitload of absolute psychos, and then the slightly more restrained people who want to do everything they want, but in a way that like the sums add up. The closest analog is Britain, by far. Like, we have the closest politics, right?
I suppose in a template.
Netanyahu would never drink out of the puddle. I will put my thing back. He would never drink out of the puddle.
I mean, some of Boris Johnson's decision making was like quite Netanyahu. Like he did the same things of like alienating the same like everyone else until he was like finally got forced out.
There's another thing I wanted to talk about, which was the putative U.S. Arab allies, Jordan, Saudi Arabia. Like the rest of the Gulf
Did you
states.
see the Jordanian king posting about any of this?
Just like one of the world's tiniest men.
Yeah, it's sort of the handshake meme with Rishi Sunak, right? It's like, psychically, I am 6'4".
I love how he had to pretend to be like a bomber pilot, but
yeah, he had a photo taken in like a flight suit, and then he had to like clarify that he wasn't actually flying like an F-15 himself.
Yeah, and then he had to return the flight suit to the Halloween store. But look, the children's section's popular. But this is again, it's Iran.
The literal short king.
It's true. Iran has pursued. Again, like you look at Iran, you see a country that is working towards a goal relatively patiently and strategically. They have pursued thawing of relations with U.S. Arab allies at the same time that Israel has thawed relations with them. Like, I believe the Saudis and the Iranians have had open diplomatic relations for just over a year now. And this is something I think goes under discussed as they attempt to become a power in the region, and why you can't just assume that U.S. Arab allies would just go along with a fight against them. What is the role of the U.S. Arab allies in the sort of ongoing, simmering proto-conflict between Iran and Israel?
All the Gulf Arab states are terrified. Jordan is...
They have to they all have these covert relations with Israel, right? I mean, Jordan was involved in intercepting a lot of the Iranian missiles that flew over the airspace. Saudi Arabia, there were accusations that they did, but I'm not sure of the veracity of them. Here's the thing. Before October 7th, Saudi Arabia was going for this really audacious thing, wherein not only would they have a defense pact in the same way that NATO works with the United States. So if Iran attacks Saudi Arabia, then that's fucking over. There was also going to be a defense pact with Israel and the United States as part of this package deal. And they were going to openly pursue this. And then obviously October 7th happened, and now they can't do that. There is a Arab population, I would say most of the Arab population, that bitterly opposes any sort of normalization with Israel. Doesn't matter if you're Saudi Arabia, Jordan, whatever. Poll after poll after poll after poll shows this. There's even been a reversal in Saudi Arabia. That's been identified. They can't pursue an alliance with Israel openly, the kind that Israel is now talking about wanting again. They Gallant is saying that the attack on Israel by Iran means that we can pursue these kind of strategic alliances. You can't. If they do that, then they're even stupider than Israel. It's going to jeopardize their whole game. I mean, that's their role is to be these quiet intermediaries wherein they can try and stop things from popping off as much as they otherwise would be able to, but they cannot pursue open alliances with one or the other, at least not at this point.
Yeah, I mean, there's been some instances in which it kind of was able to slip under the surface, but at the end of the day, these are unrepresentative and despotic governments, and even if they borrowed every riot cop in Algeria, it wouldn't be enough given the amount of outrage that this has generated day on day watching the Israeli conduct in Gaza. And I guess also the thing that that strikes me with this is that you don't have to be world's #1 Iranian government fan to look at how they have behaved diplomatically in the last decade plus to say they have basically been engaging in every process with more good faith than the states at least they've engaged with, in the sense that in America, no matter how willing the government is to, the present government or, the Obama administration might have been to try to foster an Iran deal, at the end of the day, so much of American domestic politics hinges around no, we'll fucking destroy, we will immediately nuke Tehran. It's just how do you go into an agreement like that? The Israelis would be, it feels like it's the same thing. It's no matter how much quiet diplomacy there might be, domestic politics won't allow it. And you cannot say they haven't been patient. And obviously, there's going to be back channel things. There's also going to be subterfuge. There's going to be espionage, things along those lines. These are the states that are hostile to one another. But diplomatically, they've been pretty straightforward, in my opinion, at least. And what that's gotten them is just a barrage of the most incoherent invective from, sort of the governments in waiting of the even further right parties in those countries.
It must be so frustrating being particularly a senior IRGC officer, right? Because you sort of imagine being Qasem Soleimani, right? Back in the day, you're sort of engaged in this grand power competition to move and counter move. And what you find you have done is that you have entered yourself in a kind of chess game against someone who keeps eating the pieces.
Yeah. You thought they were going to at least be able to engage at the same level, and instead it's they've been too busy trying to invent a flavor of ice cream called WhatsApp that their hands are too sticky to pick up the pieces.
Yeah, you put them in check and they shoot you. What do you...
When Trump was elected, I mean, you could kind of hear the frustration that he had when he would make speeches, because I believe the comparison that Soleimani made was that Trump speaks like a casino dealer or like a bartender. It's so without worth or substance, and it's just all of the deep rot at the heart of American society that's come back into the fold. It's crude, it's gross. And no, I mean, this is a separate issue, but the current batch of Israeli figureheads, spokespeople that constantly have to be splashed across like British TV in particular. All of the sheen that the Israelis had at one point of being like these smooth operators who were capable of this like immense long-term strategic planning, that's all gone out of the fucking window. It's all of, again, that rot that was always beneath the surface but kind of covered up. It's all out there out in the open, and it's so obvious, and yet like we're still being expected to play these games about like how things used to be in the past, that they're still the same way today.
We're I mean, you see that people still get stuck in this paradigm of like, oh yeah, the intransigent Israeli right led by people like Avigdor Lieberman, and it's like Lieberman quit the government. Like Lieberman was insane and it was all about like, I love killing Arabs so much, but like this was too much for him. And it's like what you're facing with is just something that it's been caught in this, for lack of a better word, sort of doom loop. I would say primarily, if not solely, because of, I don't know, the cynicism of Benjamin Netanyahu and the complicity of Western governments to indulge this. And it's like, I don't want to believe that deep down that they're so ill-informed that they're kind of believing the propaganda and hype, but it just feels like everyone who's actually trying to make decisions outside of the sort of, rogues gallery we just named realizes how much bullshit is being traded back and forth about this, and how much disinformation, how much is wrong information. And it's like, I can imagine being an Iranian negotiator or military commander in this regard must be incredibly frustrating, because it's like, your enemy, but not only does your enemy not know themselves, they're hitting themselves in the head with a hammer constantly.
I do get the feeling that this was like partially Zarif's frustration, who was the old foreign minister.
Oh, wasn't he the guy who said, I assume most Americans have read Alexis de Tocqueville?
No, that was...
Well, there's your fucking problem.
I mean, that's another thing. That was President Khatami, who was like his own thing of like, he assumed that the Americans were like way smarter and more cultured than, because Iranian politicians, they have to have a PhD to be elected to parliament. And that is obviously not the case anywhere else.
What are you talking about? I have a PhD in canine mixology.
Yeah, apart from like Germany, but they let them plagiarize those.
Imagine if you were an Iranian senior politician and not only are you trying to foster something that doesn't involve, huge, open, direct conflict, but also you own part of a pistachio export concern, and you're just like, fuck's sake, can we please get a deal through? I really want to sell these. And there's like, no, we're gonna scupper it at every opportunity. It's like you just invested in a gender reassignment surgery clinic as well, and it's just like, fuck, can I just export these services? Nope, not allowed to. You're blacklisted, boycotted completely.
Just because I was the IRGC's like photocopying intern for 1 month.
If Iran's next like chess move is that they want to like give me a gender affirming surgery, I would be happy to,
Nova, I really would love to like see your reaction to, because this happened about a year ago or so. Far's news agency, which is like affiliated with the IRGC, they held a meeting with trans men in Iran to talk about the societal issues that they face. And one of the primary issues that was talked about was the fact that everyone thinks that they're gay, but in reality, they're just trans. These are the complexities of trans issues in Iran.
Yeah,
they're all sure. Trans, okay, can't be gay though. Please don't be gay.
Yeah, this was my thing. Is like, yeah, they can give me the surgery, they cannot find out I'm a lesbian. Like,
yeah. So I want to just like, by way of concluding, right? Because we're coming up to time. I just want to leave us, I think, on the question of we sort of alluded to earlier, right? That Israel is seeing this as its opportunity to continue having a free hand in Gaza, and increasingly, by the way, like speaking out of both sides of its mouth as regards settler violence in the West Bank.
Yeah, I mean, we asked earlier whether we think that Israelis think that this is like 67, and I think they think it's like 48 is the thing. Like the same kind of level of like chaos and lawlessness in pursuit of like territorial gain,
But this is I think one of the things that I'm driving at as well. They see this as a sort of like a second foundation, I think. This is 419. This is is it 67? Is it 82?
Second War of Independence.
Yeah. And, there seems to be willingness, to continue committing atrocities in Gaza, supporting them in the West Bank. But also there seems to be a desire at a time of, just from a purely strategic point of view, like putting this sort of, moral approbation at all this out the window, is that from a purely strategic point of view, there seems to be a desire to use what is essentially a colonial police force that only knows how to kill civilians and make TikToks in their destroyed homes to then pursue a regional power agenda. Do you think that that's true? And based on what we discussed here, if it is, it seems like it's going to both happen and go very badly.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much precisely it. Again, that term that I used before, sleepwalking, that seems like really what's happening. Like, everyone in Israel is sort of hyper aware, even if they don't want to admit it. I mean, the Telegram groups of hundreds of thousands of people that are pushed by the IDF, when, news anchors talk about how, amazed they are at the images of Gazan homes burning, about the hospital sieges and all these things, that they're aware of what their army is doing. And yet they understand that point. And then they see the point about Israel losing its standing in the world, about all the dangers that it faces ahead, and they can't connect the two. They don't see the connection because they've lived in this fantasy world that many countries have never been able to truly experience, in which the US has protected them from virtually all sorts of harm for decades and decades and decades. Like, Britain has suffered this inane atmosphere in which they had an empire, they lost that empire, and they are struggling to get that empire back. But like, there was still this like controlled descent, more or less. And the hangers-on are strange, but like, there's not this collective, and I do like collective in like 95% of people are not within this collective psychosis. Whereas in Israel's case, it truly does feel like almost the entire society is on board with just mass murder. And they want this regional power to return to what it was. They want it to be even greater. They want their existence to be not only sustained by the United States, but guaranteed, unquestioned, in the same way that European nations are. Like, you don't talk about France being disestablished. You may want it to, but like, you don't like talk about it as like a logical possibility that could materialize. This is the thing. What I fear is that war is going to come to Lebanon. War may indeed come to Iran. War may come to the West Bank, all these different places by Israel's hands. But at the end of it, Israel had like all of these discussions that happen in newspapers about like Israel has no plan for the day after. And that's really the problem. That's not the root of the problem. They don't intend for there to be a day after. They may think there is, but like, they don't really give a shit. The point is to destroy. The point is to devastate. The point is to kill. The point is to maim. Like, actually running these places, trying to form like a friendly government, those days are over. The point is to humiliate. The point is to make your enemies drink dog water and to try and eat rotten food for sustenance. The age of wanting something grander than yourself, I mean, that's not happening anymore.
I would throw this out too, that just because this was interesting. A friend of mine pointed this out to me because I wasn't really paying attention at the time. But in 2000, I believe it was published in 2007. But there was a former, basically a guy who taught at one of the I think Army War College in Pennsylvania, and it's sort of like for the curriculum for armor officers. Former military guy, but he was a civilian. He basically wrote like an MA paper or something equivalent to that about the Israeli war in Lebanon in 2006. And it was pretty devastating in terms of the stuff that he brought up, and the sort of fixation on air war, the fixation on like basically like a complete change in doctrine that didn't translate to anything that made any sense. It was sort of like, imagine instead of getting like an order to saying at this time go and occupy this position, it was more like weird Sun Tzu shit about like, confuse your enemy by juking left when they think you'll juke right, things along those lines. But the thing that stuck out to me the most was that like in 2006, of all of the units that were deployed, not a single one of their brigade commanders ever crossed the border into Lebanon with the troops that were forward deployed. And that was not a thing that was seen as a particular, like the former Air Force general who was I believe he was the head of the campaign. I don't know what his position was exactly. He wound up not advancing further, but like a lot of this was kind of buried. But the troops, when interviewed, and then this guy, the guy researched this and spoke to people, a lot of the commentary was like, all we've been doing is occupation duty in Ramallah, we've been in Bethlehem, in Nablus, like basically just harassing people at checkpoints. Nobody, not only is in terms of like having the kind of the sort of trade craft required to sort of like not get immediately killed in a force on force conflict, but also just sort of like not knowing any of the basic drills you're supposed to do like infantry shit, because they just don't do it. And that was this constant complaint, like, we aren't trained, we don't have the experience, we don't do any of this stuff. We were like, go take this house. No one knows how you take a house and not get killed. And I bring this up because that was 2006. And when you think about where Israeli domestic politics and the sort of implementation, the usage of the Israeli military, what those were like in 2006 versus now, it's only worse. And I do think that Gaza, you see plenty of evidence of this in action. It's just that also, like, in that case, the sort of dictated by air war, constant bombing, huge, overwhelmingly civilian population, and they're just brutalizing and murdering them. It is in case there's any ambiguity on my part, like, it's absolutely a genocide, but like, it's not a force on force conflict in the same sense, but this would be. And I feel as though, like, as you said earlier, Séamus, like that bloodlust, that sort of hunger for war, that hasn't diminished. And I feel as though the sleepwalking comparison is great because, frankly, like, the minute that it's no longer threatening videos, and press conferences from Hezbollah, it's actual force on force conflict, like, those actual reality is going to puncture that conception of how things are going to go. And I just, like, I don't know, it's going to be horrific. And I think the people that would suffer the most are going to be civilians in these countries, in places like, like what on the order of what Palestinians are experiencing. That's the thing that concerns me. But, like, I also think the Israeli military, the Israeli state, doesn't realize that, like, just because you can get your ideological enemies banned off TikTok and fucking Instagram doesn't mean that the guys who've been training on how to use these munitions against your equipment aren't going to do it.
It's like the U.S. government sending the NYPD to invade Canada.
Yeah, so I was going to say, probably like comparable military budgets between American military aid to Israel and the NYPD's budget. I look at this stuff and it's just like, it's just on a long enough timeline, if it goes the way they seem to want, the Israeli state, Netanyahu's government seem to want to take it, like, it's going to come into contact with people with, in crudest terms, people with guns who know how to use them. Like, it's not going to be, which is not to disparage what, not to denigrate or to reduce the degree to which, like, Hamas as an armed organization is engaging with the Israeli military, but it's a different thing when you look at what you described with Hezbollah, for example. And I don't know. I don't think that, I don't want to see it happen. I don't want, because of the consequences it's going to be for non-armed factions, but, like, fuck's sake, man, it just feels like it feels like it's heading towards that, and it's being abetted by a combination of cowardness and just sort of like choose your own reality.
Yeah, it's sort of like Israel approaching the big, how many sad movies are we going to have to make about this, like 10 years later, sort of.
They're going to need a new term beyond shoot and cry. Like, it's going to have to be, there's got to be something stronger.
We've invented shooting and crying too.
Slaughter and cry. I don't know. Sometimes it's like I try to make a joke about it, but I can't, because it's just like it's fucked. So anyway,
and again, like to put Hakeria, the IDF headquarters in the middle of Tel Aviv, and then every so often Haaretz writes an article about it that's like, hey, is it going to be a problem that, like, the middle of Tel Aviv just has the IDF general staff?
It's one thing when there's a daycare in the Pentagon. It's another thing when there's a Pentagon in the daycare.
It's in a skyscraper. It's in like 3 skyscrapers, which are across the street from 3 civilian skyscrapers.
I can't believe that they put the IDF headquarters in the middle of the chill out tent. Anyway, I think that's probably a good place as any for us to leave it.
I know, Séamus, you're going to plug your Substack, but I just want to say to listeners out there, read Séamus's work. It's great. I'm a subscriber as a person, not as Trashfuture research consultant, just as a guy. It's really informative and great. I highly recommend it.
Yeah. Séamus, is always a delight to have you on the show. Except when we talk about Neom, it's rarely in pleasant circumstances, but it is still always a pleasure to talk to you.
You fuckers never have me on to talk about, like, football or like anything like that. No, it's always when something bad happens, which
okay.
I get. It's fine.
Next time you come on, I promise I'm making a gentleman's agreement. We will discuss something fun. We will discuss Neom. We'll discuss a Saudi mega project.
What you're doing is you're diplomatically committing us to a phased process that is going to ultimately lead us to have Séamus on for something nice.
Well,
correct.
Yeah, this is the unofficial launch of the Trashfuture Sports podcast, featuring Séamus.
Yeah, it's called Around the Horn 2. It's exactly the same as Around the Horn. All right.
I was thinking more of like a Barstool vibe, and then trying to figure out which one of us gets to be Dave Portnoy, but you know.
No, it's a Dungeons and Dragons actual play podcast where we're playing as the Barstool Sports staff.
Yeah, with Barstool Sports staff play Wokehammer. That's right.
Yeah. Okay, Séamus, once again, thank you very much for coming on. Nate, as you say, we must wholeheartedly recommend your writing on the subject. If you want to go into more detail of anything we've talked about, Séamus's Substack is a great place to start. It certainly provides a lot of the jumping off points for how I talk about the issue, so I must recommend it. Also, if you're listening to this, you are listening to the free episode. There is a bonus episode. It comes out in a couple of days. It's $5 a month. There's the $10 tier with Left Unread. November and I are going to be doing the second Aubrey Maturin book soon there. Mm-hmm. And also, I just want to put my foot down. I'm getting messages. I'm getting Twitter comments. We're getting messages on Patreon saying, oh, you're just doing a joke. You're actually going to watch the Kevin Hart Netflix vehicle Lift. We are not going to watch the Kevin Hart Netflix vehicle Lift. It's never coming out. So, like, if we do, then something... you know what it is? If we release a bonus episode at some point in May, maybe after one of the long weekends where we might want the Monday off, I don't know, about the direct-to-Netflix Kevin Hart vehicle Lift, that is me blinking in Morse code that I am in distress.
That's Swan Lake on the TV.
Yeah,
right?
that's right. Olympus has fallen if that happens. Anyway... thanks again to Séamus. Thank you for listening. Thank you to my lovely co-host, and we will see you again on the bonus episode. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.